lived the first 34 years of my life as a woman. So I had fear as well, coming out as a new man with a disability and being the age that I was.
G'day, I'm Peter Anthony. Welcome to Growth Tales. Lino Martinez has a doctorate in psychology and is the author of A Little Less Fear. He's also a trans man living with a rare genetic disease. Expect to learn what Lino's medical condition taught him about fear, the journey of a trans man, and how to transform fear into love. Here's Lino's story. G'day, my friend Lino. How are you, sir?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much. I love being lit up by your energy. Thanks for having me on your show. This is incredible.
Absolutely, Lino. You're one of my favorite people in the world. And what
Thank
we're
you.
talking about today is fear.
Yeah. hmm
And it's a topic, I mean, the American Institute of Mental Health suggests that 95% of people experience fear. I'm thinking, what are the other 5% doing if they're not experiencing fear? So
Sure.
it's something that's close to us all. But I'm wondering, just curious about what's been your journey with fear, Lino? When did fear first turn up in your life?
I mean, it could be a general question since fear can show up in any type of situation that you have in life. But I mean, it's been ever more so present in my life in struggling to survive through a rare genetic disease. And currently, I'm on remission right now. But before I was on remission, being born with a genetic disease, I actually wasn't diagnosed till I was 36 years old, and I'm 44 now. So it took a
Wow.
very long time. So the disease had from birth to 36 years to manifest and do all its job, and that was to cause an incredible amount of inflammation throughout my body. So the disease I was born with is called Muckle-Wells syndrome. That's two words, M-U-C-K-L-E, Wells, W-E-L-L-S syndrome. And in the United States, it is statistically 1 in a million. And in Europe, it's statistically 1 in every 500,000. Reason being is because it's mostly common in the European descent. So obviously there's some
Okay.
European in my DNA going on over here.
Okay.
But aside from that, what made it tricky was because it was such a rare genetic disease, doctors really didn't know what was going on. And basically what the disease does, it causes so much inflammation in different parts of my body, and it affects my peripheral nerves and my motor neurons. And anyone that knows about peripheral nerves or motor nerves, that's basically everything in your body, from the way that you talk, from when you walk, from your rest, your digest, from your heart rate, from your sleeping. Everything. It affects every single thing in your body. And so by the time I was 26 years old, I wasn't able to pee. I couldn't pee. So doctors did a bunch of
Wow.
studies trying to figure out why couldn't I pee, and they couldn't find answers. And so I ended up going to UCLA, where I had an incredible amount of tests done where they were able to see that my pelvic muscles really weren't functioning. I guess in a way you could say they were paralyzed. And in them being paralyzed, there was so much inflammation that it just wasn't, nothing in the pelvic area was functioning. And so like any body organ or any muscle, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so I
Yeah.
wasn't using the urinary bladder because none of the muscles were working and were harmonized together, well balanced together, synchronized together. And because of that, it caused my bladder an incredible amount of inflammation known as interstitial cystitis that caused the lining of my bladder to harden and shrink the bladder.
Oh,
So
wow.
by the time I was actually in my early 30s, I was only holding 4 ounces of liquid, which means I had to pee all the time, all the time. And so, yeah, all the time.
We shouldn't be
And
laughing at this, because I'm sure it was
it's,
a catastrophic way of living.
well, that's just because I'm smiling about, I mean, I can smile now, but I mean, at the time it was awful, honestly, Peter, it was. And so doctors tried to save my urinary tract system, my urinary bladder, but they couldn't. And in saving it, I went over close to 15, 20 surgeries and them just trying to fix this urinary bladder. And they tried making it bigger with a really huge surgery. They cut it in half. They use a quarter of my part of my small intestine to make the other part of the bladder bigger to increase the capacity. But that didn't help. And actually what ended up happening after that is I was left catheterizing every day, catheterizing 10 times a day for a whole year through my urethra. And if anyone's
Wow.
ever been catheterized, even
I have
once
been,
or twice,
I have been, yes.
it's awful.
It is awful, painful in, painful out. It's not a pleasant
Exactly.
experience.
Painful in and painful out. And so the more I catheterized, my urethra became strictured and tightened, and that actually made it more difficult for me to catheterize. But I had to keep going. That was my only way to pee. I couldn't pee any other way. So 10 times a day is 300 times a month. That's what I was averaging 300 times a month catheterizing for a whole year. And by the end of the year, I was crying to my doctors, and I said, "Can you please just remove this bladder? I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to live like this. There's no way."
Yeah.
And so doctors at UCLA got together, really big time surgeons got together, and they decided to do what's called a radical cystectomy. And a radical cystectomy removes the entire bladder. It also removed my urethra. They did a complete reconstruction using my small intestine, about 30 inches of it, creating a pouch, reconnecting my kidney tubes, using my appendix as a conduit for me to catheterize through. A conduit is like a hole, aka a stoma. And that is how I pee now. It is a stoma, which is the side of my abdomen. I stick a catheter every about 3 hours in order for me to pee. But after that surgery, I mean,
Wow.
yeah, it's really incredible. And at the time, I mean, I was the youngest patient to ever have this done. I don't know what the statistics are like now, but that was 10 years ago at UCLA. Was I going to live? I mean, you want to talk about fear? I had major fear. Was I going to live?
Yes.
And I had got my doctorate, I mean, back in 2010. And at this time, I started to become really depressed. I thought, why did I go through all that school? I went to school to become a psychologist, to help people, to be there, to listen. And now here I am saving my life. What am I supposed to do? At that moment, I only knew is that I had to keep pushing through fear and keep going. I don't have time to have fear at this point. I only have time to survive. And so at that moment, I had to keep going one day at a time. What's next? What's next? What's next? So to make a long story short, it took about 5 years to heal from that operation. 5 years of constant infections, 5 years of living in hospitals, 5 years of reconstruction going on because a lot of urine kept leaking. And so I was bedridden. I also had a transporter. I had a feeding tube because the disease was affecting my swallowing. So I had a feeding tube for 8 years, and I was wearing hearing aids. And when I finally got diagnosed at 36 years old, at that time, the disease was starting to attack my vocal cords. And so I lost my ability to talk for 2.5 years. So I went to sign school. Yeah, I was scared. I was scared as shit. You best believe it. Now I can't talk. What the heck is going to happen with me? Yeah. I can't pee like a normal person. I've got a feeding tube. I'm losing my hearing. Now I can't talk. I'm becoming deaf and mute. My body hurts all the time. I have no energy to do anything. What's the purpose of my life? What else is there left for me to do? I mean, this was constantly living in fear. And when you're constantly living in fear, your cortisol levels, your hormone levels, they're out of whack as well. And at this point, all my adrenal cortex was sucked out dry. I wasn't even producing any cortisol anymore, meaning I wasn't producing any stress hormones. So I was very, very, very fatigued all the time. Then they put me on prednisone.
Because you're constantly stressed, right? You're in a constant state of distress, potentially more than stress. So all those adrenals get drained. They never get a chance to get replenished because you've got no non-stress time to recover or recoup.
Right. Yeah. So I wasn't producing any stress hormones because I depleted them all. Probably my whole life, my body just constantly under stress trying to survive. So at this point, they put me on prednisone, and which is a steroid hormone to bring me back up, give me some energy, and it did help. It actually helped quite a bit. So when I was silent and I was living quietly, I became a practicing Buddhist. And I became a practicing Buddhist because I had a friend actually that asked me if I wanted to go see a monk speak. And I said, I'd love to go see a monk speak, sure. Well, I wasn't saying, I was texting at this point. Yeah, sure. Tell me about this monk. So, yes. Yeah. I'm so glad that I live in this time of age because I can't imagine what it was like before when you only had a phone call. And at that point, I couldn't talk. And I got to tell you something, Peter. One of the most painful things was that people didn't really understand what it felt like to have paralyzed vocal cords. It felt very painful. And so vocal cords, they move even when you breathe. When you're breathing in and out, your vocal cords are moving. But when they're stiff and you're trying to even breathe and move, it hurts for them to move.
Wow.
And so, I would have friends come over. Let's watch a comedy. I don't want to watch a comedy because then it's going to make me laugh and it's going to hurt. So I didn't. And without joy and laughter, I mean, what are we doing in life if you're not experiencing joy and laughter? I mean, I was really missing out on happiness at this point. But it became a Buddhist culture that brought me back to life. And in this Buddhist this Buddhist that I saw live, Gen Kelsing Rikpa in Los Angeles, said that just because you are suffering doesn't mean you have to be in pain, and just because you are in pain doesn't mean you have to be suffering. And when he said that one line, that was enough for me to be fished in and be like, tell me a little more, because that's exactly what I needed to hear. And in that is how I found self-love. And in that is how I found compassion for myself. And in that is how I saw that you can turn fear into love, and that there's purpose to fear. There's not just flight and fight, survival, and there's a lion in the jungle and I'm afraid and now I got to run for my life. There's also a beauty to fear, because fear has the ability to blossom into love. And so I started meeting fear in the middle and saying, you know what, fear, I see you. I love you. I invite you, and it's okay that you're afraid. And you can envision giving fear a hug, whatever fear looks like to you. And every time I saw fear with the eyes of love, the more I started to radiate love. And the more I started to radiate love, the more I started to see everybody around me with the eyes of love. Less fear invited more love. Yeah.
Wow. Well, because you think of the typical way we think about stress response is fight or flight.
Yeah.
There's a stressor. You've got a bear outside the cave. We're primitive people, and we're either going to run outside and fight the bear, or we're going to run away from it. And most of us are ancestors of people that ran from bears rather than fought bears. That's why we're alive, right?
Yeah.
Right. So our instinct with fear is to either fight or flight. And that's still how a lot of the medical literature and the corporate literature talks about stress and anxiety is the fight or flight response. But what you're suggesting, and what the Buddhists suggest, is that there is a middle way. There's a way of just staying with it. Like
There's
staying with the fear.
a way of staying with it. Yeah.
Staying with it. But what you're suggesting is not just staying with it, but it's transforming or transmuting that fear in some way into love.
You can. Everything is energy, and everything has a vibration or frequency into it, within it. So you can change fear, the frequency of fear, into love, simply by literally looking at it with a different feeling and different eyes, different lenses. Yes. And I still experience fear every day. I mean, it's still going to happen.
Or different names. I mean, I know when we've chatted before, I've shared with you that I love ocean swimming. Like we swim through the surf and we swim up and down an ocean shoreline here in Manly in Sydney. And it's interesting how people look at the ocean. You're looking at the same ocean, the same waves, the same swell, the same temperature. And some people will look at it as that's something to be feared, and I'm going to run away from that.
Sure.
Whereas other people like me think, wow, I love this ocean. I'm going to dive into this thing.
Oh, yeah.
If you like, I'm going to dive into this and experience the beauty of being in that nature and being in that warm embrace that the ocean can give you. And you think, well, it's the same, not the same experience, but it's the same asset, if you like. It's an ocean, it's an illness, it's a stressor, it's something, an activating event in my life. But I do have a choice to what I call it. And if I call it something different, I might have a different relationship.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. And rather than thinking, because I'm anticipating, I can't imagine the depths of pain you must have experienced for such a long period of time. And I hugely admire your resilience and your ability to live through that, live through the pain, live through the doubt. And I can't imagine how challenging that would be. But I'm curious about this fear relationship and thinking, okay, how did that transformation take place from fear to love? Because it wouldn't just, or would you just wake up one day and say, hey, I love this? Or was it a process that took place?
It was definitely a process. It was a process of a lot of meditation. It was a lot of process of me sitting with myself, by myself. It was a process of me unloading labels, all these boxes I had checked. I lived the first 34 years of my life as a woman. So I had fear as well, coming out as a new man with a disability and being the age that I was, where a lot of a variety of, actually most commonly nowadays, people tend to transition at a younger age. And I thought, well, here I am at an older age. Now I'm a new man. What does that mean? I've got some fears. Will I ever be man enough? and now I've got a
Yeah.
disability, and it just all of these fears kept
Wow.
coming up. So I had to keep facing these fears, and a lot of these fears I would ask myself, well, what is this? What am I afraid of? Or what is the underlying feeling? What is the core belief behind this? Because everything that has a result of fear is based on negativity, and all negativity is fear, and all fear is negativity. There are only two emotions in our human life. It's love and fear. That's it. That's all that exists. And so in this, I would ask myself, am I doing this? Am I choosing this? Am I acting out of fear, or am I acting out of love? And anytime I would
Yes.
say, oh, this is out of fear, I would have to come back and say, okay, I want to act out of love. What would love do? In this situation, how would love react? Love wouldn't judge
Yes.
you. Love would see you for who you are, your energy, your light, the love that you give. Someone will see this. Someone will understand you. Someone will feel you. So I always had to bring it back to myself. Okay, hang on a minute. What's going on here? What am I feeling? And constantly be in my mind and bring myself back to reality, because the real deal, true reality is love. That's what we're all here for. And that's what makes us all bloom and come together. So are you acting out of love, or are you acting out of fear?
Out of fear. So while you were going through this medical, if I can call it a medical challenge, that sounds like it's an underestimate and not big enough. You're also realizing that you're a man, or did you was that something that you a thought that you had, or an awareness that you had prior to this, all
Oh
these
yeah, I
catastrophic
mean,
medical issues?
I remember being about 3 or 4 years old and thinking I was already a boy, but I didn't understand genitalia when I was 3 or 4. But
No.
my mom forced me to wear dresses. Anytime I would dress, like change my wardrobe out into something masculine. Let's say I used to steal my brother's clothes all the time. I wanted to dress like my brother. I'd get in trouble by my mom. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Get
What are you
out of
doing?
this. Yeah,
Get out of this.
let's put some bow
You're a
ties in your
girl.
hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a constant fight that I had with my mother all the time, my whole life, even until my early 30s, until I finally, when I was living in hospitals, and I realized, like, why am I still hiding from her? This is who I am. I want to dress like a man because I've always felt like a man. I know I've got a boy brain, man brain. It's a masculine brain. But wait, I've got more to say about this, Peter. Let me just hold on a minute. I get really excited about I
Yeah,
get excited
go,
about
go, go. It's all yours, Lino. I love you, sir.
Oh, thank you. And then so when I finally decided to transition when I was in hospitals, because I thought, I remember Caitlyn Jenner transition was in her 60s. And I thought, wait, if a
Yeah,
woman in her 60s can transition, I could do it in my 30s. So I decided
yeah.
to make this transition at 34 years old when I was in hospitals. And I thought, if I'm going to die in this body, it's going to be in the right body. It's not going to be in this body. And so, but lo and
Wow.
behold, when you become more loving to yourself, more respectful to yourself, when you listen to your inner voice, when you find your authenticity, you start to come into alignment with your true self. You start to come into alignment with your nature, and people start to see you, they start to feel you, they start to be motivated by your own actions. And these are the things that kept me going. I realized, like, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this, or what I'm even going to look like 5 years from now, but I know this feels right. And so if it feels right, just go with it. I mean, I feel it's by no coincidence that now I'm thriving as a man where I wasn't as a woman. So, but
Yes.
the thing that I've realized, though, Peter, now that I'm past the suffering, now that I'm past the turmoil that I was going through, whether or not I was going to live or survive, whether I was going to live or die, excuse me, was that I'm okay. The fact that I was a female before I wasn't so much distressed about it. There was fear about it. If people find out, what if people find out? What's going to happen
Yeah,
to me? Oh my
yeah,
God, will I ever be
yeah.
man enough? But one thing I realized when meditating and becoming spiritual is that everybody encompasses both masculine and feminine energies. And when
Mm,
you are able to sit with yourself and close your eyes and say to yourself one day, Peter, who am I if I'm not Peter Anthony? Who am I if I'm not Peter? Who am I if I'm not a
yeah,
father, if I'm not a husband? Who am I if I'm not a
yeah,
man? Who am I if I'm not a podcaster? Who am I? And when you start to
yeah,
ask yourself these questions, you drop your body, you drop your labels, you stop
yeah.
boxing in labels, and you're like, holy moly, I'm just being. I'm in full awareness at this moment. I don't need to
Mm,
become anymore, because at this moment, I am being. I am. And while you are at
yes.
that moment, I then realize I am masculine and I'm feminine. I'm everything that I've ever been and everything that I ever will be right here, right now. And that's how self-love started for me. And when I started to find that self-love, that's when fear started dropping. The more you
Wow, wow.
embrace and love and self-love, the more you let go of fears.
So it's a journey of awareness of who you are, which is what you're suggesting. I realized
Absolutely.
what I didn't realize. I accepted that I was a man, and I'm accepting the condition, the medical challenges I'm facing. And it sounds like those decisions were happening concurrently, or not decisions, they're realizations, if you like. This is who I am. And that seems to be part of the healing for you. It was realizing who you were, and accepting who you are. It seems like that coincided with you healing. You're finding your voice
Absolutely.
again, finding your health again, uh, finding your identity as a
Absolutely.
man, and that's part of the process. And it could be. It's interesting. I like to think a lot about messages and where they come from. And I'm not so concerned about where they come from, but I know that they come, and that when you're meditating the strongest and you're most at peace, is
Sure.
when the real messages come to you, right? And
Yeah.
you think, if I deny those messages for long enough, I'm going to get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, whether it's physically sick or mentally sick or really unhappy, whatever that combination is. And a lot of that, often a lot of illness and a lot of unhappiness, are messages, I'll say, from beyond, that something's not quite right. Like you're not accepting Lino, or Lino's not accepting Lino. And
Exactly.
the pain gets bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually wake up and think, hold on, maybe I should do something about this.
Exactly. And that leads me to show you this book right here. So there's this book that actually really changed my life a lot. It's called Eastern Body, Western Mind. And this is the
Wow.
psychology and the chakra system as a path to self. And this book is actually what taught me that a lot of our fears are stored in our pelvic region. We've got energy
Wow.
centers in our body known as chakras, and chakras
Yes.
store emotions. Chakras store fears and anything that we resist, any type of emotions, negative emotions, they're going to be stored in our chakras. And so when I came to realize all of this, that it wasn't the genetic disease's fault, it wasn't anybody's fault. Whether I incarnated or reincarnated to have this life experience, I won't know until I die. I'm on the other side and realize why I went through it. But whatever whatever the reason is, I've come to realize that a lot because of the psychology of the chakra system and other spiritual leaders that I've followed and learned from. um, the pelvic area stores a lot of fears. And so if I was
Okay.
constantly living in fear growing up, of course I'm going to lose my ability to pee. I'm not even able to feel like I'm the right gender. So how am I going to blossom? Of course things are going to stop working right in that area. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it goes forth. I mean, the rest of your chakras are all in alignment and they all have their purpose and their own storage and everything. So when you become balanced with yourself and you become accepting of yourself, this isn't just me, I'm speaking for the world, for everybody. When people start to live their authentic self, their authentic voice, there's less disease, there's more gratitude, there's more appreciation, there's more flow, there's balance, there's harmony, there's acceptance,
Yeah.
there's eagerness,
Yes.
enthusiasm, joy, peace, and it just
And
keeps
you can make
going.
and you
Yeah.
can make your unique contribution. I mean, the unique contribution that Lino's designed to make.
Thank you.
You are then capable of making it, because you are accepting and talking from that space, if you like.
Yeah.
You're not talking from a space of denial, or not acceptance. You're saying, hey, I realized who I am.
Yeah.
This is who I am, and this is the voice I'm speaking with. And I think that's what makes you such a powerful influencer in the world, is that. And when I first met you over a year ago, I thought, I didn't know why, but as soon as I started talking to you, I thought I can really connect with this guy, because you're speaking from that that honest, truthful, self-accepting space. And that's a less fearful space to be living from, because if you're afraid of yourself, the rest of the world, there's a lot of fears out there that can add to that basket, right?
And almost everyone's afraid of themselves, and it's by default. It's because of how they were raised or things that they see on the news, and they've been
Yeah.
conditioned to fear themselves and their own voice. And that causes disease and disruption and dysregulation
Yes.
and a lot of contrast. So yeah,
And a lot of
invite.
unhappiness, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of stress. I saw some Pew research recently that said that Americans have never been less likely to change their minds, never been less likely to change their minds. And a lot of what the study was suggesting was that because of the way social media algorithms work, we get fed more and more and more of what we believe already. Like if I believe in red,
Oh
I'm going to
yeah,
get a lot of red. If I believe in blue, I'm going to get a lot of blue. If I,
right.
whatever team I follow, I'm going to get more and more feeds telling me what a great team that is. Or if I like gardening with roses, I'm going to get a lot of content on how great roses are. So it's not opening my mind, it's closing me up, if you like, rather than opening me up
That's really fascinating
to,
way to think of it, and it's true
to
actually. Because if the algorithm's feeding you what you are currently believing, how are you going to give yourself the time and the grace to think outside that box? And
yes,
yeah,
particularly like if I'm in a bigoted box, I'm in a box that's very bigoted or very destructive to other people.
yeah,
I'm gonna get more and more certain about that because all I'm going to get is a lot of bigotry in my feed. I think, wow, the world's full of bigots just like me. That's great. Just
exactly,
reinforces my bigotry,
exactly.
right?
Wow,
It's not opening it up.
right.
It's closing it down, which that causes me concern because I'm thinking there's going to be obviously a mental health issue for people like that, and
Absolutely.
also a wider societal issue because we won't be collaborating or getting on as well as we could. So, I mean, I also love your book, A Little Less Fear, and one of the things I love about it is it's not like sometimes you'll watch people like a Tony Robbins, for example, and it's like never leave the scene of a decision without making massive action. Destroy the fear and go forward like some giant, like awaken the giant within.
Sure.
But it's not like that. It's
No.
it's like it's a relationship, so it's about having less fear. And what
It's
you're
about having
suggesting,
less fear because not everyone can just face it head on. And also facing fear with grace. If you're facing it head on and just busting through it, there's a little aggression involved in that. And in
yeah,
aggression itself, there's fear with aggression. You can't fight.
yes,
You can't. I mean, you have to put love into it.
you have to put love into it. So maybe I can suggest you retitle your book "A Little Less Fear and a Lot More Love."
Yeah, maybe there'll be a sequel.
A Little
There,
Less Fear is book one. Book two is a lot more
a
love
lot
because you're
more
thinking,
love. I love that, Peter. I know there's gonna
"I'll
be a
get."
sequel. Yeah.
Oh, there's got to be a sequel, sir. I mean, you are a gem, and it's anything that you publish, the world's going to, the world's going to love it and embrace it. Because I like this idea because you think, okay, uh, if I'm reprogramming or thinking about fear differently, I've got a blank. What do I do? And you think, well, I can do nothing, just have less fear, or I can embrace it. I can I guess because you're suggesting part of that journey initially was loving yourself or having a loving relationship with yourself
Having a
through
relationship
that.
with yourself, becoming your own best friend.
Yeah, and loving yourself and say that this is the man I love. This is who I am, and this is how I'm going to be. This is the man I am. And also, I guess for the people around you to say, "Hey, I'm going to have a loving relationship with them."
And people will mirror you. The more you love yourself, the more going to be like, hey, what's Lino doing over there? I want to do some of that. Like, well, I'm just loving
I would
myself a
some of
little more. And then they're like, well,
I would
well,
some of that love.
maybe I got to love myself a little more.
This is the we should maybe start a love podcast, Lena. The
That'd be
podcast of
excellent.
love.
Yeah.
Have lots of. And I know too that you are a prolific poet,
Yes.
and
I started writing poetry when I was about 7 years old. And
wow,
it's really incredible. I remember being a teenager and looking back at my poetry when I was 7 and 8 and being shocked at how I wrote. I couldn't believe the way that I used metaphors at such a young age. And now that I'm in my mid 40s, I've realized that it's higher consciousness, the loving consciousness of the universal collective that flows through me when I write. That's why at 7 it looked like I could have a 50-year-old could have written it because it was coming from a higher consciousness. And so it's a gift that was given to me and from from universal consciousness, higher consciousness, from God, however you want to call it. And because of that, I give
Yeah.
it back to the world, and I give my poetry back to the world. It was a gift for me to share.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you listen to poets or songwriters talk about being I use that word inspired to write a song. They'll
Sure.
often just say they were just sitting down with a guitar or just sitting down with a piece of paper, and the words just came out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost always a process of, I didn't write that. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was. I was just writing it down. I was just playing those chords.
Yeah.
But I didn't make up those chords. I didn't make up those words. That they came from somewhere else. And
Oh, yeah.
potentially, if we're more connected with ourselves and we are loving ourselves more, those sorts of creative inspirations are more likely to happen. Would you say, if you're more open?
Absolutely. If you're more open with yourself and you're open with to receive, if you stay in the receiving mode of love and just the receiving mode in general, you're going to be receiving more messages. And creatively, the creative is coming from the divine. It's benevolence, it's beauty, it's gratitude, it's appreciation. Creativity is creation in motion. So the more you allow creation to be in motion, whether it's writing a poem, drawing stick figures, or talking to somebody creatively, creation can be anything that you make it. We're constantly
Yes,
creating.
and yes, if you're in that, I call it being in the corridor. Like when I'm in that corridor, I meet different people. I have different experiences. I feel different ways. I'm more creative. I have thoughts and
Yeah,
ideas that aren't really mine. They come at me. I can't say that was my idea because where did it come from? And it doesn't, to me, in a way, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. I just like being in that space because it's a
exactly.
more loving space. It's
Yeah,
a more gracious space. It's a happier space. It's a less fearful space to be
absolutely.
in. It's extraordinary because when I think about that space we talked about earlier, uh, I can recall uh, one of the first poets I loved, which was John Keats, and the beginning of one of his poems says, "Oh, what can ail thee, knight at arms, alone and palely loitering? The frost has withered from the lake, and no birds sing." And when I read that, I was about 15 or 16, and I thought,
Yeah,
wow, that explains perfectly how I felt then at that moment, which was very depressed, very alone. There were no birds singing. It was cold and frosty. Uh, and I thought those words were a beautiful way of embracing that feeling or explaining that feeling. I'm thinking, wow, John Keats felt that like 300 years ago.
yeah,
And one of the reasons those sorts of words resonate is because I feel the same way, and millions of other people. Or you listen to a song and you think, wow, the lyrics of that song and the sound of that music, so much is so much how I feel, whether it's happy or sad or fearful or loving or whatever it might be.
sure.
And it's interesting to your point about us feeling the same way. You think, well, maybe we do all feel the same.
We are. We're feeling the same way. And you know what I felt right now when you said that poem? And because I'm not in a depressed state, I saw it more beautifully. But when you said that you read it in a depressed state, you were still also able to see it beautifully. And that is a
Yes,
perfect example of turning fear. Depression and fear are on the same frequency. I mean, if you're depressed, there's a lot of fear going on. And that's turning
yes,
it and meeting love by reading this poem and feeling the beauty of a silent bird on a frosty lake. And I mean, it sounds and it feels
yeah,
beautiful. And that's
yeah.
converting that fear, that depression into something symbolic, but beautiful at the same time in form.
Yes, yes, it is. It's beauty. Yeah, it is. It is beautiful. It was a beautiful way of explaining that feeling, and I love that relationship you have between fear and beauty, or fear and love, and the bridge that you're building there. And I'm thinking, if I mean, we started by talking about what over 90% of adults are fearful, experience fear,
Sure.
and I'm thinking if there's someone listening that's experiencing fear right now, and maybe not just fear I'm going to miss the bus, but something a little more substantial than
I
that.
mean, more like
What would,
existential type fear.
yeah, or just like maybe it's, I mean, the biggest, from what the research I've read, the biggest fears we have are there's health fears, financial
Sure.
fears, and relationship fears, like fears about relationships, like will I meet someone, or is this person that I'm with going to be like loving to me? Will this work? Financial fears about am I secure enough financially for now and for the future? And I guess health fears, which you've shared with us quite tragically, like just how deep that was
Yeah.
for you. And you think, if I'm experiencing those sorts of fears, what would be your suggestion? What would be your suggestion to
You know, right
them?
now when you said that, one of the first things I thought of that I've learned and I'm still learning is that fears are an opportunity for us to see where we can grow. And fears show us where we need to let go. And so one example I could
Okay.
give is when I was living in hospitals and I was like, well, what am I going to do with all the student debt? What am I going to do with that Mercedes that I had? What about all these bills? There's nothing I can do. I'm
You had a
living in hospital.
Mercedes?
I did. Oh, I had to let it go. I had to let it go, Peter. It's gone. It's
You were
long
driving to
gone.
hospital in a Mercedes.
No, I let it go. I had to turn that car in and let it go, and so and in that it was that's part of releasing fears and just letting it all go, because at the very end none of this stuff is going to make me happy anyway. The only thing that's going to help me make me happy is having my health back. Not that Mercedes, not
Yes.
that doctorate degree at that moment. Nothing mattered at that moment but my health and my survival. And so meeting fear and actually just letting go. I give myself the permission to let go. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And when you let go, you know what else you're doing? You're also trusting. You're trusting that things are going to work out. Little do you know, the moment you let go, you're trusting. And so that's
Yes.
what I mean with fear. Like fear is actually an opportunity for you to grow and to learn something, learn new about yourself, and to expand and to be free with yourself.
Yes. Yes. To be free. And I remember too, many years ago when I was in a very fearful space, um, I stumbled across some work by Les Brown. And I listened to a talk that he made at a huge stadium. And one of the phrases that really stayed with me is, it's possible. It's possible. Like what you're thinking about, like in your case, you think a healthy life is possible. Because a lot of stress and fear, you think I can't do this. I can't overcome this. I'm not enough, if you like. And
Yeah,
Les Brown's saying, hey, it's possible. And even like
it is possible.
yeah, it's possible. And if I can believe it's possible, uh, that may be enough to get me through whatever that fearful space
I
I'm
love
in
that,
right
Peter,
now.
because rather than if somebody is currently in a fearful space or depressive state and you're trying to tell them to say yes to your life, they're going to say, what? Get up, get
Yeah.
away from me. No, no,
No,
I'm not
no.
going to say yes to my life. But if you give them a baby steps, the word possible is like, it's it's a small little way of stepping up. Okay. It is possible. There's a little bit of light shining in when you say the word possible. I
Yeah.
love that. And if it
Yeah.
becomes, if
It's
it's slightly possible, it means it's possible in general, period.
yes, it's possible. It's possible. It's possible I can do this. And then I can start imagining the possible and think of I like to think of the smallest possible step I can take. If it is possible, what's the smallest possible step I could take in this fear? And I take
Yes,
that small step, and that gives me a little more courage, a little more hope, and then potentially I
absolutely.
can take another step,
Yeah.
and then another step, and I think, shit, I've just taken 3 steps. I didn't think were possible. What else?
Next thing you
What
know,
else is
you're
possible?
leaping.
I'm leaping like a gazelle.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not a leaper. You'll never. One thing you'll never find me doing is leaping. I'm probably the least athletic person I know. I hope it leaping anywhere, but I can. It's a nice analogy that I'm leaping through all
Yeah,
this, through all these things. I just get concerned about some of the so-called self-help literature around fear and stress. It's all about taking the big action and change the plans. And I think, well, if you're in that state, that can be really challenging, and
it
not
can.
being able to take those massive steps will make you more depressed and more anxious and
Oh yeah.
less capable of moving it forward.
Yeah. Well, for some
of moving
people,
that.
even the smallest possible step is a leap. So
Yes, yeah, it can be, or it can look like a leap, because one of the insidious things about being very fearful is you tend to shrink. Your mental capacity, you don't think as clearly, you're not as strong, you're not as active, you tend
right.
to withdraw from social support,
Oh
withdraw
yeah.
from people, you'll potentially not live, you live a less healthy lifestyle, you probably might not eat that well. There'll be a whole range of things that are happening. And again, I guess
Yeah.
from your perspective, they're just signals to say, hey, who are you?
It's all an opportunity to sit you down and be like, what's happening here? Let's take a look. Let's just
What's
take a
happening
look.
here? So, what's the next leg of the journey for Lena? I mean, you're a man I'm fascinated to follow, because I think, wow, I look at what you got to what you, and in that process, you managed to get what, a PhD in clinical psychology, as well as managing these issues. Is that, was that at
Yeah,
about the
so I
same
have
time?
actually, it's called a PsyD, which is a doctor in psychology. PhD
Okay,
would be more, it's a doctor of philosophy, but I'm actually a doctor of psychology. And right now
okay,
I'm a professor. And actually, going back on the topic of fear, I actually recently had some fears because I come out to my students on the first day of classes and I let them know that I wrote a book and that I survived a disease, and here I am teaching now and I love it. But I left out the part that I used to be a woman, and that's the I mean, that's 34 years of my life. I mean, and I realized that I had a lot of fear with it, and I even called the chief at my school and just to talk to him. Should I tell my students? And he actually said something wonderful. He said, "If you tell your students, you will be gifting them with diversity." And I thought, well, that's beautiful to gift
wow,
someone with diversity. And so he was able to help me through his words, challenge my own fears, and realize that it's more of a diversity that I needed to come forth and not really be doing it. I mean, I was afraid that I don't know what I was afraid of, honestly. When I think back, like, why not tell them these are psychologists? They're all going to be doctors. They're going to see plenty of
yeah,
trans students. I don't know
yeah.
what the fear was or what the holdback was, but I finally told them, and they're just like, okay, like it's no big deal. Like, all right, cool. So when other people, I feel that a lot of people will realize this themselves when they finally face their fears. That some people might just be like, "All right, well, okay, big deal," and then you realize,
So what,
"Holy
big girl?
moly, that was easy. I'm glad I faced my fear."
Yeah. It's that, what, in that case, it's what, fear of rejection or fear of judgment or fear of
Yeah, yeah,
whatever it is.
exactly.
And I like that. I'm going to give them the gift of diversity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I like that phrase. I'm going to give them the gift of diversity. I'm going to be who I am and give them that gift
Yeah,
of this diversity. And as you're suggesting, particularly if they're psychology students you're teaching
yeah.
at
Uh
this
huh.
university, you think, well, that's a gift they should embrace, right?
Yeah, yeah,
If
exactly.
I mean, not as if they're, say, studying physics.
Right.
Not that people studying physics aren't, but it's not such a gift if I'm studying physics. But if I'm studying psychology, I think, wow, and that, in my mind, if I was a student, that would increase my confidence in you
Thank you for that, Peter. I appreciate it.
as a student, because I'm thinking, wow, this is the person. If I'm thinking about thinking and thinking about how people think, or how humans think and how the mind works, somebody with that background is going to have a very uniquely insightful perspective I'd like to learn.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm thinking that's how the students would think. I mean, if I was doing a psychology class and you walked in and you told me that, it's like, I've survived this debilitating illness with like 20, 30, 40 surgeries through my life. And I've, through that process too, I have transitioned to, is it correct language to say I've transitioned to a man? Is that the right language to use?
I
Because
feel like it's controversial.
you're a male. In my mind, you're a male already, so you're not really transitioning to anything because you're already a male.
So Peter,
That's
you're
why I
right
get
on, and this
confused.
is this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm not a biggest fan of telling people about it, because I've always been a man. I just didn't form
Yeah, it's not.
to the way that I would have
Yeah,
preferred growing up. But a lot of
yeah,
people are very defensive and protective over their new gender, and so they're like, "Yeah, I'm a trans man," or "I was," or I mean, I'm a trans man, and they really embrace with that title or that check mark or however they want to they want to mark that box. But for me, I'm just a man, and that's why sometimes I
Yeah.
cringe in like telling people, but also I need to be proud of my journey. Like, well, it's the journey
Yeah.
that I went through, and yeah, I was a woman for 34 years. I will believe it or not. Don't let this hairy beard fool you. Just kidding. I can't even joke about it because it could be very sensitive for a lot of people in this community. But me personally, I can use humor with myself because that's kind of what lightens up the subject.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to
And
fool
it makes
anybody. I'm actually here to inspire people and motivate people.
Yeah, and it makes it easier for other people too, right, Lino?
Yeah.
It makes it easier for other people if it doesn't come on like all heavy and challenging and difficult, because that's may make other people more uncomfortable. Or yeah, what you're doing is you're loving them by saying, "Hey, this is who I am."
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
And thank you for allowing me to talk about this on your podcast. I had an experience in the summertime where I was going to be on someone's podcast, and prior to being on this supposed podcast that I was going to be on, I was very open about my past, that I was a woman, that I was transgender. And this is actually what closed me off. I was going to be on this guy's podcast, and he had the discovery call first, and he says, "All right, man, tell me about yourself." So I told him about myself, the disease, that I was a woman, blah blah blah. And he was taken aback, and he said, "Hang on a minute, bro, what?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." And he says, "Hey, man, you can't say that on my podcast. Anyone that listens to my podcast knows that I hate the transgender community." And I said,
Ooh.
"Oh, wow." And I couldn't.
Wow.
Yeah, no one's ever really said that to my face. I mean, through Zoom, at least, But
to my virtual face.
Yeah, to my virtual face, right? But I was actually upset about it, and it took me a day to respond. By the next day in the morning, I emailed him and I said, "I'm not going to be on your podcast. I'm not a fit." And he said, "Oh, what happened, bro? Is it something I said?" And then I said to him, well, he was Latino and I'm Latino. And I just said, well, what if I told you that people on my podcast know that I don't like Latinos and you're Latino, so don't talk about your background whatsoever. I said, I'm proud of who I am. And if your listeners know that you hate transgenders, guess what? I'm all over Google. You want to have me on your podcast? All they have to do is Google me and be like, whoa, you had a trans dude on your show? So he didn't answer after that, but I felt great and proud of myself that I defended myself, and in that I showed myself grace and love and appreciation for who I've become. But it was challenging, and that actually shut me down for a while.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It was tough.
Yeah, I can understand that happening because I have met people like that.
Sure.
I've met people like him, like this guy that you're talking about, and it's
fear,
very,
Peter.
very.
It's fear.
It's fear. It's fear. It's fear and it's ignorance. It's bigotry. It's a whole lot of different like things rolled in together. I guess we've got to be concerned about him and think, wow, I really feel sorry for that individual. And at the same time, hats off to you, because the world is embracing this community more, and in embracing gender divergence more, and people like you can help the rest of us embrace it and accept it and love it as a really important part of our global community, if you like.
Peter, I got to say something.
Make that process easier for all of us.
I have to interrupt with something. You said that you feel sorry for that individual, for people like that. So I used to feel that way, but going back on the context of love, because I know he's got so much fear, anybody that reacts like that is out of fear. What I did that night is I prayed and I wished him love. I've never met him, but guess what? In my vision and in my meditation, I pictured hugging him and telling him, you are love. You send people love, even your worst enemies, and they will receive it, because we are all connected collectively, universal consciousness. So I have no doubt that in one way or another, he's going to have some type of love that he had experienced through the connection that he had with me. Somehow, maybe I will never know. But I trust the fact that I sent him with love. And with that, my heart stays open.
Wow. That is such an enlightened way to be thinking about him, and send him love.
Absolutely. Send him love.
Send him
love.
He
needs it. Yeah.
He does need some. He definitely needs a lot of things, but one of the things he needs is love. Yeah, for him, I might do that in my meditation tomorrow morning. I might send people like him love.
It's a beautiful
Because
feeling. Oh yeah, it's a great feeling.
it definitely does work. I meditate every morning, and not every morning I do this practice, but regularly I do send love, like healing love, in particular healing love to people that are going through a difficulty. I just send it to them, and I believe they receive it too.
I love it.
I don't know how. I can't explain how that process works, but I don't really care how it works. I don't really know how my car works, but I drive it around. I don't really care how it works. No. I don't really understand how engines work, and I don't really care, right? They work.
Right, yeah,
push the button and the
all
car comes on. Right? It works. That's all I need to know. It works, right? I don't need to know the whole process to believe the car's going to get me from here to here. Just put some petrol in, get it serviced, and all those things, and away it goes. Away it goes. Lino, I could literally talk to you all day.
I know, right?
I love your energy, and I love your insights. I love your perspective, and I know the world's a much better place having Lino in it. Have you got any final thoughts or final suggestions you'd like to share with people about fear and love, which for you they travel together?
Yes, and it's because it's helped me, and I've seen how it's helped a lot of people, especially in the Buddhist community, people that are actively meditating. And to ask yourself when you're stuck making a decision, or whether or not it's the right thing to do, ask yourself, is this out of fear or is it out of love? And if it's out of love, it's always going to be the most expansive, the most motivating, the most enthusiastic path to take. The path of least resistance, meaning the path of most allowance, is the one that opens up your heart, and that's love. If you can choose love, it's going to just radiate through your entire life, and everyone's going to feel it, and other people are going to be motivated by it and reflect that upon you and upon themselves. Always choose love over fear. As much as, even if it hurts, love is always greater than fear, no matter what.
Lino, this has been an
I have a poem to
treasure.
share, though, Peter.
Oh, you've got a poem too.
Yeah.
I want to hear a Lino original poem.
All right, let's do this. I wrote this yesterday.
Yeah. Go.
It's called Discovering Self.
Discovering Self.
In rediscovering self, I had to tear walls down. I had to drown a few times and resuscitate myself over and over again. In rediscovering self, I released fears, I released tears, and embraced all the years over and over again. In remembering who I am, I learned to smile again and laugh and cry again and love again and love again. In this newfound integrity of being me, I am set free, knowing that it's all been worth it again and again. And I am set free to be me. That's it.
I'm set free to be me.
Yes.
I'm set free to be. I like that a lot.
Thank you, Peter.
I like that a lot. And thank you for sharing a poem. I didn't think we'd be getting a poem, but it's fantastic. It's an extra treasure.
You're an extra treasure.
A Lino original. Lino, this has been fantastic. I could talk to you all day, and the listeners could get like a ton of value from you. And
Thank you, Peter.
In the show notes to the podcast, I'll be leaving links for people if they want to reach out to you or find out more about your book and your work.
Yes.
But for the time being, Lino, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
And I wish you much love in your life.
And much love right back at you. Mwah.
right back at you. See you later.
See you, Peter.